With US assistance, Israel blocks efforts to get its nuclear arsenal examined, turning round a previous resolution from the International Atomic Energy Agency. So, where does this leave the security of the Middle East? And what about the double standards of the nuclear arms debate? This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to the programme. I'm Nick Clark. Yes, Israel narrowly won a diplomatic victory at the UN on Friday when the International Atomic Energy Agency rejected the motion that Israel should sign up to the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty proposed by the Arab states. The atomic watchdog voted 51 to 46 with 23 abstentions against the resolution. The Israeli ambassador to the IAEA had warned that approving the motion would represent a fatal blow to regional security. He said although the result highlighted the optimistic nature of the conference, it really wasn't about winning or losing.
I don't consider it a success. I consider it as a victory of the reason over some kind of political efforts. So it's not a matter of succeeding.
Well, the US and its Western allies had pushed the Arab states not to put this resolution on the table. Glenn Davis, the US ambassador to the IAEA, said that if it had been passed, the resolution would have jeopardized the conference on a nuclear weapons-free Middle East, which is scheduled for 2012.
There were no winners, there were no real losers in this vote as far as I'm concerned. But what's important here is that we have preserved a chance for the peace process to move forward, and we have preserved the opportunity with that peace, when that peace is achieved, for what we all would like to see, which is not just the Middle East as a zone free of weapons of mass destruction, but the entire world.
Well, plenty to discuss, and joining us today to do just that are our guests in Jerusalem, Ephraim Inbar, Director of the Begin Sadat Center for Strategic Studies at Bar-Ilan University. In London, we have Mark Fitzpatrick, Director of the Non-Proliferation Programme at the International Institute for Strategic Studies. And joining us via broadband from Cern in southwestern Switzerland, the former Deputy Director General of the International Atomic Energy Agency, Bruno Pellot. Welcome all of you to the programme. Good to have you here. Bruno, if I could start with you first of all. No winners, no losers, just the right decision made. So say the US and the Israelis. Do you agree with that? Right that Israel's nuclear arsenal should go unchecked at this point in time?
Well, I think Vienna was the wrong venue to discuss Israel's activities and Israel membership in the Non-Proliferation Treaty. This was done in New York earlier this year, which was quite appropriate. And indeed, as it was mentioned before, there was an agreement to meet in 2012 to discuss this issue at the appropriate level. Vienna is not the place to discuss Israel. That was, I think, a wrong attempt by the non-aligned movement in particular to move that agenda to Vienna.
Okay, well, Vienna nevertheless was the location where the decision was made. So whatever, do you agree that it was the right decision or the wrong decision?
I think it was the right decision, be it only for the sake of the procedure, because Vienna is a police headquarters. You don't discuss national policies in the police headquarters, so to speak. So the decision was right because it should not be discussed in Vienna at all.
Okay, now, just tell me one thing. Israel, of course, has never confirmed or denied having atomic bombs. Do we know precisely how big the nuclear arsenal is in Israel?
Well, there are estimates which have been made because the fact that Israel disposes of nuclear weapons is, of course, well known. The estimate is always around 200. So that's an agreement, and that's probably enough of an estimate.
Okay, Ephraim Inbar, you, I'm sure, can understand why Israel's near neighbours would want to take a look inside your country's nuclear arsenal.
I think some of our neighbours want us destroyed, like Iran, Syria. So I think what happened in Vienna was a victory for common sense, basically recognizing that Israel still faces existential threats from its neighbors, and it is a neighborhood where the NPT is being violated, Iran, Syria, in the past by Libya. So I think that our position, maintaining this nuclear option, is acceptable in the West. And the issue is not a universal appliance of the NPT, because we know that the NPT is not universal. There are countries that have nuclear weapons, and I'm sure that the Mexicans are not particularly concerned by American weapons, or the Irish are not concerned by British weapons, because those countries have democratic, stable, responsible regimes.
Tell me why, Ephraim Inbar, why Israel shouldn't put its nuclear weapons under the oversight of the IAEA. I mean, notwithstanding relations with neighbours, why shouldn't that happen under the scrutiny of an international agency?
I think that Israeli government prefers not to acknowledge in public, because of a variety of reasons, its nuclear arsenal. And as a result of that, it is critical also of the NPT, particularly of its effectiveness. Its inspection, the police functions, unfortunately, is not a very good one, as we've seen in the past, and we've seen it now happening in Iran. So the NPT, unfortunately, is not the best way to achieve regional stability and peace in the region.
Okay, Mark Fitzpatrick, the NPT is certainly under the spotlight, isn't it?
It certainly is. There's been a lot of attention, a lot of interest in moving towards a nuclear weapons-free world of the kind that President Obama laid out in his speech in Prague a year and a half ago. We haven't made a lot of progress toward that goal, unfortunately.
So, Amma, it's interesting, isn't it? Because there's so many rights and wrongs debated by both sides. But Amma Musa of the Arab League says that the decision paves the way towards an arms race in the Middle East. Do you concur with that point of view?
Oh, no, I don't think so at all. There is a danger of an arms race in the Middle East of a couple of different kinds. Israel's presumed nuclear arsenal has been in existence for, 30 years, presumably. It hasn't necessarily expanded in the last 10 years, but what has happened is that Iran has acquired capabilities that get it pretty close to being able to produce nuclear weapons, and it's done that in violation of its IAEA Safeguards Agreement, in violation of the spirit and letter of the NPT. So if there's any new development in the Middle East pertaining to nuclear weapons, it's not Israel's arsenal, however much one might disagree with that, but it's Iran's breaking of its obligations.
Do you disagree with Israel's nuclear arsenal?
Well, I think that every country should strive toward a nuclear weapons-free world. That world should be one, though, where we are secure in our national identities. A world in which people gave up nuclear weapons that was less secure, that brought about something like a World War II type disaster, wouldn't be an appropriate world. But look, yes, we should be without nuclear weapons, and a good way to start is not to expand the number of countries that have them.
Okay, Bruno Palou, I suppose it is arguable the fact that Israel is a nuclear power means that there's been less trouble in the region than there might have been.
Well, that's really speculation, and I cannot really comment on that. I would just like to make a comment on the point you raised right at the beginning, the double standards. The NPT is built with an inherent double standard in the sense that there are 5 weapon states acknowledged, accepted, and the others are the have-nots. So this is something which will need to be corrected in the long term. There is another double standard in the sense that there are countries outside the NPT, Israel, Pakistan, and India. So the first thing is to say that these countries have not signed the NPT, therefore they are not bound for it. They are not bound by it, they are not bound by any verification by the International Atomic Energy Agency. So one should take that into account. There is a situation with Israel in the Middle East, but Israel is outside the NPT and is entitled to do so. I would like to return the compliment that our friend in Tel Aviv is making to the IAEA. I always find that people who are sitting on the fence should not criticize the organization which is doing the job, because I think the organization has done a pretty good job. But Israel is not in the treaty, therefore that's not an issue of double standard.
Okay, well, let's put that through. Let's put that to Ephraim Inbar. He's actually in Jerusalem, not in Tel Aviv. But Ephraim Inbar, what do you say to that, the view that the IAEA has, in fact, been doing a pretty good job?
I think that IAEA is only partially performing well, and we've seen clear violations of the NPT in Iran, in Syria, in Libya some time ago, and those all were not caught by the IAEA, but by other agencies or other groups in those countries. So I think that much should be improved in the NPT. But the issue of arms control, I think, should be understood in a more profound way. Basically, arms control is possible when the political circumstances are ripe for it. Just arms control doesn't prevent enmity from countries. Disarming Israel or disarming other countries in the Middle East will not prevent war. They'll go to war by other means.
But why can't Israel allow, say, I don't know, inspectors in to look at the site at Dimona? There's a nuclear reactor facility there. It's known that there's one there in the Negev desert. Why can't Israel allow that to happen?
First of all, we are a sovereign country. We have every right to prevent outsiders, foreigners, to look at our military installations. Second, we are afraid that if we join the NPT, it will be exploited for reasons espionage reasons in our countries. And this is precisely why Israel is reluctant to sign a variety of international arms control treaties.
Well, as I was saying, Israel is known to have been developing nuclear weapons at its Dimona site in the Negev desert since 1958. It's estimated that they may have stockpiled between 100 to 200 warheads. Israel never officially confirmed or denied this, as we've already discussed. And in the wake of the Israeli attack on an IAEA-approved nuclear site in Iraq in 1981, the UN Security Council passed Resolution 487, which urged Israel to place its nuclear facilities under IAEA safeguards. Now, Israel rejected that resolution. Spin forward to September 2009, the IAEA narrowly passed a resolution urging Israel to join the NPT and bring its nuclear facilities under inspections. It was the first such time that a resolution had been adopted, a resolution that it appeared that President Obama supported.
As far as Israel goes, I'm not going to comment on their program. What I'm going to point to is the fact that consistently we have urged all countries to become members of the NPT. So whether we're talking about Israel or any other country, we think that becoming part of the NPT is important.
That was then. More recently, in his last meeting with the Israeli Prime Minister in July, President Obama contradicted his earlier statement, saying that Israel has special security requirements.
We strongly believe that given its size, its history, the region that it's in, and the threats that are leveled against us, against it, that Israel has unique security requirements.
Yeah, Ephraim Inbar in Jerusalem, the president there saying, you know, we'll look the other way and you just carry on.
I think this has been the American policy because there are clear understandings between the United States and Israel on this issue. One of them is that Israel will not cross the threshold of a nuclear test. And the Americans have traditionally been more sensitive maybe than other countries in the world to our security predicament. And finally, President Obama, despite its principled opposition to nuclear arms, which doesn't apply, of course, to the United States for the time being, has accepted Israeli position.
So, Bruno Palourde, what do you make of these, the kind of the fluctuations that we're seeing here in the way that the president frames his argument?
Well, I think it is something that goes, of course, beyond the nuclear issue. It has to do with the fundamental position of Israel in the Middle East and the relationship with the United States. Personally, what I believe is that Israel has been threatened and not recognized by Arab states for a very long time. And I think for this reason, I believe there is a legitimate reason for Israel to have developed nuclear weapons to secure its survival. So the first things to do, I think, would be for the Arab state to follow Egypt and begin to consider the existence of Israel. And then I think there would be a nuclear negotiation that would start on the Middle East nuclear-free zone, or in 2012, as announced in the NPT review conference at the beginning of the year. So maybe, first of all, the overall political tone should be reduced, and then one could engage, hopefully, into nuclear negotiation in the Middle East before ultimately bring Israel and also India and Pakistan into the NPT, which would be a very good universalization of the NPT treaty.
Mark Fitzpatrick in London, you want to come in there?
Question? Yes, I do. I think it's not quite fair to play the two clips that you have and to say that this is a contradiction in position. President Obama's position has been pretty consistent in calling on all states to join the NPT. He's called on Israel, India, and Pakistan to do so. He noted in the second clip the particular circumstances that make it difficult for Israel to do so tomorrow. But as a goal, this is pretty firm. And when President Obama accepted the outcome of the NPT review conference in New York in May, that called for this conference to be held in 2012. And he did so not with the firm support of Israel. He took a lot of heat from Israel over this. They weren't happy at all in Israel that Israel alone was singled out for criticism in New York. But Obama went along with it because of a longer-term goal of trying to move the world in the direction of a nuclear weapons-free world. And the best outcome of the Vienna meeting last week is that it didn't do anything to undermine this goal of having this 2012 conference as a stepping stone in the right direction. If the anti-Israel resolution had passed last week, we can be pretty sure there wouldn't be that 2012 conference, and any positive results of the meeting in New York would have evaporated.
Bruno Palourde, how important do you think that conference in 2012 is likely to be? And is it likely to make any progress at all?
Well, it may depend on a number of things that will happen in between, but I think it was an important decision in New York at the proper place, by the way, as I said before. And I think it will depend on the relationship between the US and Israel, between the readiness of Israel to be maybe a little bit more flexible than it is under the current government, in order to be able at least to talk about such things.
Okay. Well, we mentioned Syria and Iran a little bit earlier, and it's true to say that the Iranian ambassador to the IAEA accused Israel and its supporters of following a policy of double standards that brings into question the integrity of the Non-Proliferation Treaty. Let's have a listen to this.
It should be reminded that for the sake of credibility, the verification process which has been envisaged in the Safeguards Agreement must be implemented without any biased political interest or double standards. It appears that the agency is suffering from moral authority and credibility crisis.
Ephraim Inbar, it seems he's got a point, doesn't he?
I think that the main problem in creating a nuclear-free zone in the Middle East is the Iranian nuclear program and the regime's goal of destroying the Jewish state. With this type of goals, there is no chance to have a nuclear weapon-free zone in the Middle East. It was Egypt that accepted Israel's nuclear option and made peace with it, and only if this example will be emulated by other nations in the Middle East, Israel will definitely consider positively the possibility of establishing a nuclear weapon-free zone, only if its existence is securely accepted by all parties in the region. Mark Fitzpatrick?
You know, it's ironic that it should be Iran casting these aspersions, given Iran's record. You know, if it was a country like Jordan that is totally open about its nuclear energy program, calling on Israel to also be open, then you'd have more of a case. But for Iran, goodness, Iran is the country that itself demands its own double standard. You know, every other country in the IEA that has a nuclear program accepts additional obligations to report new facilities at the time they are planned. Iran says no, it alone will only report facilities shortly before nuclear material is introduced, something that Mohammed El-Baradei, the former Director General, said made Iran on the wrong side of the law. So whenever you hear Iran talking about double standards, I think you have to look at their own record.
Okay, well, all right, Mark Fitzpatrick, if we talk about Iranian double standards, let's look at Israeli double standards as well in accusing Iran of double standards when Israel itself is armed to the teeth with nuclear weapons. You can see that people might think that Iran has a right to defend itself too.
Well, you know, I see the point, but, you know, Iran doesn't actually claim that it is seeking nuclear weapons to defend itself. It makes the false claim of adhering to the IEA obligations. Now, if somebody maybe defending Iran wants to make that case, you know, let them make it. But it's a circular argument. The only reason Iran should have anything to fear is precisely because they are seeking a nuclear weapons capability. If they weren't, they have no one who would be wanting to do any harm to them. The enemies that they had, Saddam Hussein and the Taliban on either the west and east, have been taken care of.
Okay, Bruno Pullo, we're just running out of time, but let's go back to this conference in 2012 and the issue of a nuclear-free Middle East. That makes a lot of assumptions that a lot of things are going to go right in the meantime, especially the peace process between the Palestinians and Israel. Let's be optimistic and assume that that goes the right way and does make very good progress. Are we ever likely to get a nuclear-free Middle East, do you think?
Well, your question is very far-reaching. But first of all, and it's an answer to your question, as a matter of fact. The difference between Israel and Iran are fundamental. Israel has not adhered to the NPT, therefore cannot be measured by the standard of the NPT. It was a free choice. All countries that came into the NPT decided to do so. Iran has signed the NPT, has never stepped out of it, therefore is subject to all regulation and verification by the IAEA, and Iran is not respecting, is not playing by the rule, is really here attempting, as Mark Fitzpatrick was saying, to have its own standard in violation of what the IAEA should be doing. So Iran should come in line, first of all, and then if Iran would come in line, would demonstrate the peacefulness of its nuclear activities, as President Obama said last week, if it would be very obvious to everybody that Iran has no hidden intent, then I think in 2012, Israel would be in a much tougher situation because then the focus would be on Israel. So therefore, let's look at both situations differently. You know, if somebody commits not to smoke, you cannot, you can blame him if he's still trying to do it in hiding. But if somebody remains outside a commitment, you cannot blame it. And Israel is entitled to its present position.
Okay, well, it's a complicated, difficult issue. We appreciate all your perspective. We ran out of time now. We thank our guests, Ephraim Inbar, Bruno Pullo, and Mark Fitzpatrick. Thanks very much indeed for your perspectives on this. Thanks a lot. And thanks for watching this edition of Inside Story. Always happy to hear from you. Just email us at insidestory@aljazeera.net. From me, Nick Clark. It's goodbye.